Welcome into the Kings Beat podcast. I'm James Hammy, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. We are, of course, a Blue Wire podcast, and we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Joining me today, Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Had like the two monitors up last night because I'm at the 49ers game, but I still wanted to watch the game. So I've got a monitor to be able to watch all the replays for 49ers above me. I've got the phone for the Kings game in New Orleans. And then in front of me at the press box, I've got the 49ers debacle. So, when there's like, after we finish games and it's like who comes up to the podium, 49ers should have brought up their place kicker, Jake Moody, and their punter. That just would have been fantastic. That should have been, those were punter and kicker podium games.
Yeah.
So I dealt with that.
That's their version of the Keon Ellis game.
Yeah.
Of course, we are also joined by Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
I am doing good. I am a little curious now, and only for half a sec, want to ask Sean about all this Devondre Campbell stuff that was going on. How wild was that yesterday for you?
Yeah, pretty wild, man. I mean, I've never seen a guy just I've seen it in retail where someone just goes, all right, pull the name badge off, I quit, I'm walking. Haven't really seen it in the NFL before, but it was interesting to hear some of the guys react to it. Certainly Kyle Shanahan reacted to it in one way, but pardon me, I feel a sneeze coming on.
Oh, bless you.
Even
that
muted
was a
the
good
mic.
one.
That
Yeah, I did.
cool.
I was very kind. That was a James Ham-like sneeze. If you ever heard James Ham sneeze, brace yourself. It'll blow
I
out
sneeze
the window.
loudly.
Yes, you do. Yeah, it was odd because you just some guys who just don't want any part of it. Other guys are like, oh, I don't think I should talk about it. And you have other guys that don't give a damn and just rip the guy.
Charvarius Ward.
Like Charvarius Ward and George Kittle. I mean, George Kittle, the more he kept talking about it, was just more and more bothered by it. So, yeah, just a wild circumstance. I've never seen anything like that. And good riddance. I mean, kick rocks. That's not a guy you want on your team if that's the way he truly feels. And I only say if because we haven't heard from him. At least, I haven't. I don't know if there's been any news come out, but who knows if there was, something bothering him, whatever. But it's a punk move.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. Number one, what we're talking about is Devondre Campbell, the San Francisco 49ers middle linebacker, who is, like, for all intents and purposes, he's been ass all season long. He has not been a good football player at all. Part of the reason the San Francisco 49ers are in the position they're in is because during the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, he was unplayable and they had no one else. So they played him and they lost. Then last night in the Thursday night football game against the Rams, he decided in the third quarter to tell them that he was not going to go in the game that night. And then in the fourth quarter, he decided to walk to the locker room and just cash it in. So he will be waived, it sounds like, today at some point. But not something I don't think that anyone expected to see something like that on the field. We have seen it in the past at the NFL level. Didn't we have Antonio Brown just walk off and then stop in the end zone?
I forgot about that. I did forget
yelling.
about that.
And then let's be honest, Sean, we have seen something like this. We saw two players in Sacramento in the last decade decide that they weren't going into a game and said, no, I'm not going in Marvin Bagley and Nemanja Bjelica.
A little different. Those guys, the game was in hand. This wasn't third quarter, middle of the game where someone's coming to you and you're refusing. And honestly, this is literally someone quitting on the spot. I think you're right, though. The Antonio Brown is absolutely, I completely forgot about that. I shouldn't have, because that was, he literally stripped on the way off
took his cleats off, was walking with his cleats in his hand, and took his shoulder pads off, was standing there in a t-shirt.
Yeah, that was a debacle. But to see something like that transpire is it's jarring. And it does it speak to something loudly? I honestly don't think so. Like, I think there's a togetherness about that locker room, especially, I know this is a Kings Kings podcast, but there are some sort of similarities in terms of the disappointment overall, injuries and things like that. And I think, the struggles Mike Brown has had in trying to figure out his roster. I mean, it's patchwork for the 49ers. I mean, this team was built to be this incredible team where you've literally got elite players almost at every position throughout the league, at every position. And when you don't have your full complement of players, it looks a lot different. And next man up mentality only goes so far when you get that void of talent. You're literally plucking people up from practice squads. So yeah, it's tough. It's really, really tough.
It's one thing to spend your money on a top-heavy roster, but when those players on the top-heavy roster can't play, that means that you did not pay for the bench that you need to have. And that is exactly what's happened to the 49ers this year. I mean, it started with Christian McCaffrey, and it wasn't just McCaffrey. Elijah Mitchell also went down, their backup running back in preseason. And then McCaffrey sat out 10 weeks. They had 2 guys hold out, and then one of those guys, and Brandon Ayuk, blows his ACL out like in week 3. You had Hafunga, who never made it back. And then when he did, he was very ineffective, and then he disappeared again. And then he finally made it back. And then finally, you had Dre Greenlaw make it all the way back after suffering a torn Achilles. And one of the most sad moments in sports in recent memory, in the Super Bowl, where a guy's just amped up, jumping up and down on the sidelines and pops his Achilles. And to see Greenlaw come back and have this miraculous, I mean, he was phenomenal. I thought he was great. And to watch Fred Warner raise up because of that, and the 49ers only give up 12 points and then have a game marred by some idiot who needs to just go away and not play football anymore. I don't know how you recover if you're Devondre Campbell. I don't know how you recover from that. But Sean, when Marvin Bagley decided he wasn't going in the game, that was in the third quarter. And you remember they were during a timeout, they tried to put him in the game. And during that timeout, they were giving away a signed Marvin Bagley jersey in the upper deck, which is a running gag between.
I don't think that was the same moment, but
it was right then.
We've seen that for sure. Yeah.
It's a running gag between Sean and I that anytime they give away a autographed jersey in the upper bowl of one of the players that's on the court, we look at each other and go, "Oh, are they about to get traded?" And no, that's not what happened. And Marvin went on to play another year in Sacramento, right? I don't think it was his final year.
No, it wasn't. He didn't have much longer, but yeah, it was. It was different.
And Bielitsa refused to go into a game as well. He was pissed because he
didn't want to be part of the garbage time.
Yeah. So it happens, but not like that. Not where a dude walks to the locker room. And when it does, that should be it. I don't think there should be another team in the league that looks at him and goes, "Hey, I think he can help us." No.
Right.
It's usually a swan song for a guy. Let's get into a couple of things. I'm more on the business side. If you're watching here on YouTube, you don't mind, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about the channel, tell your friends to tell their friends about the channel. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers here on the YouTube. If you're listening somewhere else, give us a rating and review. And if you don't mind, whatever stars or whatever happens wherever you're listening to your podcast, and jump on board with the Kings Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com, become a premium subscriber so you get everything sent right to your inbox and you keep up with the latest with Sacramento Kings. Let's dive into this. Sacramento Kings moved back to 500 on Thursday night. They beat the Pelicans 111-109. I'm going to start with Brenden because he probably did not have dual monitors going, although maybe with the 49ers playing. But what were your initial thoughts on a Kings game that I think for the most part, a lot of us thought would be more lopsided than it was, but a win is a win, right?
Yeah, I didn't quite dual monitor it because I've been having Amazon login issues, and that's where they're going with Thursday night, which is not the right time to be having Amazon issues, by the way, right as Christmas is getting here.
You're stealing the subscription from somebody? You're using
I am using a family member's, and she has forgotten her login and doesn't have access to the email anymore that she has Prime on. And so, yeah, that's a whole
This is tragic, man.
I
might have to send you my stuff here in a minute.
Yeah, it's the wrong time of year.
Send it my way, too.
Yeah, while we're at it. No, but I mean, like you said, I mean, this is a game that the Kings were supposed to sort of take care of business. And I think the Pelicans 5-20 record is a little misleading, I guess. Like Dyson Daniels just had some comments about them being cursed, and obviously he got traded from their last offseason, and they just continue to have to deal with injuries. But DeJounte Murray in this one, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, like there's still some talent on this roster. And I think for the most part, from the Kings' perspective, you survived a game where you didn't shoot very well from three. Coming into this, I want to say they were 2-7 in games where they shot under 30% from three, and you survive those games by playing good defense. And I think that's what we saw from this group. The Pelicans never scored over 30 in a quarter, which isn't the lowest bar or anything like that. But I do think that they played pretty well on that end. They're getting to the free throw line a ridiculous amount. I mean, 29 free throws is just absurd. I thought DeMar DeRozan hit some really timely shots to get them back in this one. And, it looked like they could it looked like it could be a little scary for them at first, and then a 14-0 run. And it seemed like there were multiple instances, maybe not quite to that extent, where they were just hitting timely buckets, even if the majority of their threes and shots in general, shooting 39% in the game, weren't going down. But I thought they did it defensively. And I feel like that's what Mike Brown has been kind of wanting for this group. That's how you are able to survive the games where you don't shoot well. And I think this was a good example of that.
Sean?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's a great breakdown. Obviously, I know a lot of attention is going to be put upon the bench, and I kind of talked about it last time. You've got Malik Monk in your starting five. You've got all your scorers in your starting five. Your bench production in terms of scoring is not going to be there. You're not going to have nights consistently like you had the other night when Doug McDermott comes off the bench and hits 6 threes in however many minutes. Your scoring is going to be low. You're going to probably be consistently beat there. To point out, the Pelicans only had 18 bench points, I believe, and Kings only had 9. So, and it was a lot less than that for the greater part of that game, to be honest. So, I think what was encouraging to me, and we've talked a lot about it in recent games and in recent shows, like to me, going back to the Minnesota game, it feels like where this Kings team has turned the corner. The win in Minnesota. Now, granted, they did lose that game in Portland to follow that up, but point being, the scoring feels better, the offense feels better, defense has been there. There is still a roster imbalance. Obviously, they're still trying to figure some things out, obviously, but to me, to have the scoring up high is what we've come to expect from this Kings team. And in order for them, in my mind, to find success, they have to have that. So the numbers have been up, and last night was kind of that game where you've got guys that are struggling. You found a way to win. It was your season low in points for a win, 111. So kudos to them to be able to do that. I know there's this, well, they should have gone out there and slit their throat and won by double digits or whatever it is. You're still on the road. You still got CJ McCollum, who just eats your lunch all the time. You still have a lot of size and athleticism on that team that still gives you problems. And let's be honest, guys, like ownage is ownage. So when you've lost 6 straight to a team like that from last year, and you're looking for your first win in your last 7 games, you win any way possible. So a win is a win. You've got a lot of days off in this month of December, which you can take advantage of the schedule and work on things. But I thought it was a quality win, especially with the way some of those guys played. As Brenden pointed out, Sabonis and DeRozan I thought were fantastic. So at least Sabonis was fantastic for the entire game. DeRozan was great in the second half, but you found a way to win, and it was the fourth quarter again, your worst quarter. 20 points only scored in that fourth quarter compared to what you were able to do in those previous 3. So they found a way to gut it out on the road. I think that's fantastic for them. And I think they've, to have won 4 or 5, you're playing your best stretch of basketball as is. And granted, I know a lot of these teams are depleted that they're going up against. You can't help that because a lot of these type of teams that you're playing when they're missing their key players are typically your bugaboo. So I like what they're doing of late, and I think there's some things to be encouraged by.
Yeah, I do too. First of all, they moved back to 13-13, and they're like a half game out of like, I don't know, 9th place. Maybe, and I think it's like a game and a half out of like 5th or 6th place. They're like right there. And I do think that they're playing much better. And I also think the stack of games that are coming up, what do we have coming up? We have Denver, followed by the Lakers twice, followed by the Pacers and the Pistons. This is where you can start building some momentum. And I feel like every time we say that about this team, they do something silly, like beat Denver, beat the Lakers, fall to the Pacers, fall to the Pistons. Like it always feels like there's some like, gag that we're all going to like, oh, look, we weren't in on it. They're going to lose a game that they shouldn't lose. And then they're going to lose 2 more just to make it feel worse. So I hope that they move past that. But a couple of things. Number one, I don't think that there's anything they can do about bench scoring.
Right.
Not the way that it's currently constructed. And this is not meant to be disrespectful. Trey Lyles is not going to help your bench scoring. Like a little bit. Maybe he's a little bit more consistent than Isaac Jones, but realistically, this team needs a bench scorer. They need probably 2 at this point because of the way that you've moved Monk into the starting lineup and just the injuries and everything else has happened. They've got to figure that out. And I think that that's as big an issue as anything. I mean, they had 9 points off their bench last night. Seven of them came from Kevin Huerter, who was like 2 of 10 from the field and 1 of 8 from 3. That's not going to cut it. And that's not really a knock on Kevin Huerter. Should have hit more shots for sure. But also, like, Kevin Huerter is the only guy on the bench who is known throughout the NBA as a scorer. Everybody in the NBA can score, but to be known as a scorer, it's going to be really difficult. How do you think that they attack this? Do you think that they go out and look for somebody, or at this point, do you think, especially as a backcourt solution, do you think they're waiting for Devon Carter to see what Devon Carter looks like and whether he can give them, even if it's 6 to 8 points in the backcourt off the bench? Maybe that's something that would help this team sort of solidify who they are off the bench.
I think you definitely want to see what you have with Devin, but I would bet that like they need to improve this roster, I think, if they want to be a threat in any sort of way in the Western Conference throughout this season. And I would guess that, Brooklyn is the team that's brought up a lot. Like a lot of teams are probably communicating with Brooklyn. And what is Brooklyn's motivation? Like, why would they not just wait until the deadline and see who gets desperate? So you're probably in a spot where you're almost forced to wait a little bit. Maybe that's not quite the case, but again, from my perspective, I would think that the Nets or any of these other teams that are getting calls, like, you might as well wait and see. You're going to get your best offers probably towards the deadline. So maybe Devin can end up helping you. The backup center spot, Mike is doing it by committee right now. All of those guys played last night. And I think it makes sense. You don't have anybody that, in my mind, has consistently shown you they belong there. So maybe Devin can help. But to me, I would say maybe play with how you're staggering some of these minutes, since Malik has moved into that starting lineup. There's the stretch and Mike Brown has talked about this, but like end of the first, start of the second, and also happens at end of the third, start of the fourth, maybe about a 5-6 minute stretch in total between the two, and where De'Aaron Fox is the only playmaker on the floor. And Keegan Murray is usually there alongside him, but I think you need to try to get another one of Malik Monk, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan on the floor with De'Aaron throughout those stretches. And I know that's a lot easier said than done. The rotations are something that he really has been trying to figure out throughout the course of this season, especially with the addition of DeMar. But I would say trying to stagger those guys better. But obviously, starting Monk makes that more difficult. And I think that was the whole hesitation at the beginning of this. So it's kind of a tough spot. And maybe Devin can help you, but Devin's also not a traditional point guard anyways. Like, I still think it's not like Devin goes into that group of Fox, DeMar, Domas, Malik that's like creating for his teammates like that, at least in my mind, right away. So will he help your depth? Sure, probably. But I don't think he helps your creation off the bench or this like scoring punch that you're necessarily shooting for. I mean, you just took the 2-time runner-up 6 man of the year and put him in the starting lineup. Like, this is going to happen in my mind.
If Malik Monk had scored 16 points last night, you wouldn't be talking about this, especially if he had come off the bench. So the problem is not bench scoring. I hammered that last time. It's not bench scoring. Bench consistency for sure, but that has nothing to do with scoring. You have 5 guys that can go out there and get you 20 points. And 6 with really Kevin Huerter, who can go and do it as well. Kevin is the least consistent of that group, and that's why he's now on the bench. Brenden nailed it. It's on Mike Brown to figure out how to stagger these guys. And the biggest challenge in bringing Malik Monk off the bench, and I asked Mike this past week, is the pressure that it puts on De'Aaron Fox. And when you factor him already having to play his starters upwards of 35 minutes a game or more just to win ball games, that is not sustainable over an 82 game stretch. And so they have to, yes, to answer your question, James, they need to find consistency off the bench, whether that's right now internally or going out there and find something. They've already, made 2 moves as it is with McDermott and Crowder. Those 2 guys, with respect, don't play. So you've got a lot of upside from what you've seen from Isaac Jones. That's nice. How does that look when Trey Lyles comes back? Trey Lyles has been a 0 for this team so far this season with respect to his injuries. And Keon Ellis and Kevin Huerter, it's interesting because when these guys, when it comes to the offensive end, just as a team, when the shots aren't going, it's hard more times than not to find that one player who's going to have the good game and not see the contagiousness of poor shooting effect and impact this team. Last night was kind of the anomaly. That's why I'm so encouraged by what I saw last night. You saw Sabonis have an absolute classic game. You saw DeRozan get hot in the second half. You saw Keegan kind of come to life. You didn't really need Fox or Malik to carry you like you do so often. So you had those other guys do what they needed to do. I think it also started defensively for them. I think a lot of what they were doing in the second half was on the defensive end. And I think obviously what they did from the free throw line was sensational, and they only missed 2 free throws. So bench production is not so much scoring as opposed to just coming out there, playing with physicality and creating more offensive opportunities. And unfortunately that just hasn't been there from the bench. And the way Mike Brown plays bench anyway, you never really have a true second unit. You could argue that he might have to. He might have to go a 1 with 4 in terms of starting players and just trying to go deeper into your bench to find activity and physicality. And maybe that is bringing Jay Crowder in. Maybe that is, if you need a pop off the bench, maybe that is going to McDermott in certain situations. But right now, I don't think bench scoring is the problem.
I think Mike is searching, and I agree with you that bench consistency, whether it's as a defender or whether it doesn't matter what it is, like bench consistency is a big deal. Hey, look at that! The Miami Heat have agreed to trade Thomas Bryant to the Indiana Pacers. That's
I
from
was
Sean
waiting for that to
Schrein.
say Jimmy Butler.
Oh, well, maybe it's a precursor to something much bigger. Yeah, Sean, I agree with you. I do think that they need somebody that can create. I also think it's really difficult because right now, De'Aaron Fox is going in and playing with that second unit right off the bat. And, Mike is switching guys in and out, searching for something. And I think where I fully agree with you is that Mike isn't searching for somebody who's coming in there trying to score every single time they touch the ball. He's looking for the physicality. He's looking for the defensive prowess. He's looking for people that are playing the game the right way that night. And when he starts cycling through players quickly, it's usually because it's like, oh, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. He's like basically looking at cards and saying, oh, no, that's a throwaway. Nope, that's a throwaway for tonight. And you're trying to see the matchups and how they work. I don't blame him. Like, this isn't an ideal situation to have a starting lineup that needs to play 35 minutes a night, each of them, for you to have a chance to win. It's also not a good thing when you really only have one solidified NBA, player coming off your bench in Kevin Huerter that's played 25 to 30 minutes a night at any time in the recent past. And then again, you got some other pieces, but those pieces don't work if you don't have the engine that drives those pieces. And so
Yeah.
most of the pieces he has on the bench are non-creators. They are catch and shoot guys, or they're complementary pieces. And that's okay, but you also need that other piece that sort of drives the action.
I will say this. Hold on, before we move on real quick, I will say this. Just going back to the Pelicans game in general, they put a lot of pressure on Herter to come out there and just be a scorer, just be yourself, right?
Mhm.
But his activity last night was pretty good.
I thought it was great.
I mean, guys are going to look at his shooting numbers. He still played 27, 28 minutes, I think, and was very disruptive. So,
He had 3 steals. He had 3
Right.
rebounds. Like, go
Right.
go do something else. And I thought the second he steps on the court, all of the action on the floor starts moving faster.
Yep.
And you can see it every single time. All right, let's jump into this. We are, of course, an Underdog partner. We're super excited to join Underdog Sports. They're our latest sponsor here on the Kings Beat podcast. They've even got some really good news. They're currently running a promo for all new users. The easiest way is for you to jump on board, download the Underdog app. Uh, right now, you get a free pick when you download the app and start up on Underdog. You also get matching up to there's some sort of matching up to $1,000, something like that. So jump on board right now. Use the promo code Kingsbeat, which is all one word. Like, look, we've been playing like the daily fantasy stuff for a couple of years, and we're all having a good time doing it. This is a really cool platform. I think they're a lot more transparent than most of the other platforms. You can see how people are sort of picking more and less. You can see the percentages of how many people are loading up on more on a specific stat. And so, again, the transparency is there that I haven't seen from some of the others. But overall, like, look, I think a lot of people right now are doing daily fantasy sports with regards to, just adding to your sports enjoyment while you're watching, Kings play, the New Orleans Pelicans. If you're looking at, Domantas Sabonis's points, rebounds, and assists combination, then you probably won last night. Uh, he did very well. 32 points, 20 rebounds, 3 assists. That's a good night for anybody. So
How'd
if you
you do,
guys are,
James?
I did not play last night because
Oh,
I had too many things going on. To be honest with you, we're in the middle of soccer season, so I'm running all around the globe right now, helping out with soccer, and freezing my ass off in the rain that I'll be at a tournament later tonight. And not great to have a game at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock tonight in this weather. That's not going to be
that's the
fun.
beauty of it, though. You get to pick and choose when you want to play. You don't have to do it every day.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to do it every day. And look, I think it's just something that so many sports fans are doing right now. So jump on board, use promo code Kingsbeat. Again, really cool app, a really cool platform. And I've had a really good experience with it so far. Let's finish up with this Pelicans game, because there's some things that happened in it that again, I believe in the concept of a win is a win, right? I don't think that there are bad wins. I think there are bad losses. I think there are also games where you probably let a team stay too close, which is exactly what I think of this Pelicans game. You probably should have throttled that team, but that's not who the Kings are most nights this season. Um, what I did not like is to open the third quarter. We got like 65 seconds in, and Mike Brown had to call a timeout. His team was flat. His team looked uninspired. His team looked like a team that was ready to lose their 7th straight game to the Pelicans without a fight. And I don't get that. I don't understand that, how you can come out at halftime and look that way, and while you're a professional athlete and your coach has to call a timeout 65 seconds into a half to wake you up. That was like a major, major red flag for me in that game. But the good point is that DeMar DeRozan got the message and stood up and started knocking down 3-point shots and goes for 16 points in the quarter and carries you to victory. That to me is like, it's still a bit of a red flag. Why is it that you guys feel like this team has these moments where they just don't understand the moment? You know what I mean? They're not rising to the occasion.
Yeah,
And
I feel like it more times than not it starts with De'Aaron Fox. If he doesn't come out with that sense of urgency, the rest of the team kind of follows his lead. If he comes out and can't hit a couple shots right out of the gate, there's a let go. I don't think they do it consciously, but it just seems to, when I notice that when moments like that happens, oftentimes it has to do with something bad that's happened with De'Aaron. So yeah, having to keep their foot on the gas at all times is that sense of urgency right out of the gate. You can't just start you got to come out sprinting right out of the gate when you start the second half, and oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes you see the pace is a little slower.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he sets the tone like offensively, obviously he's kind of the one initiating a lot of things, but defensively being the point of attack guy. And I think that his energy can be infectious there. You saw a couple, I want to say there were a few turnovers in that stretch, and the Kings have actually been great with turnovers. They have the lowest turnover percentage over the last 5 games. I think that's one of the things that's really let their offense balloon in the way it has recently, is taking care of the ball. And so, I do think that Sean's accurate with that, but that's why you have some of these other guys to try to be able to pick up that slack. And for DeRozan to do what he did, and Mike mentioned in post game for hitting timely shots, I'm assuming that's probably when he was talking about. And the fact that it was 3 triples is kind of crazy, because we've seen this guy pass up wide open corner triples earlier this year. And ever since that game, by the way, it feels like he's taken him a little bit more. Obviously still the master of the mid range there, but I'm with Sean. I think that Fox does kind of set the tone there, and that's not to say that other guys can't also do that, but that does seem to be just the nature of being the point guard on both ends of the floor. You have the opportunity to set that tone.
Yeah, I thought that Fox, again, I'm with you. I'm with you guys. I thought he was lackluster to come out. He did take 1 or 2 shots and didn't hit, and it's almost like he gets bummed out by it. I'm not sure. But I also thought, he was phenomenal defensively. He ended up with 8 assists and 7 rebounds. He did other things when the shot wasn't falling. I think Fox finished 7 of 20 from the field and 1 of 6 from 3. This is one of the few games where I think the Kings won when the 3-point shot didn't go. They hit 10 threes, but if you look at, like, again, 1 of 6 from Fox, 1 of 5 from Malik Monk, and 1 of 8 from Kevin Huerter, those guys combined to go like 3 of 18, 3 of 19, right? And then throw in Keon Ellis, who goes 0 for 2. Like, some of your better shooters, or at least your more higher volume 3-point shooters, go 3 for 21. This team usually loses. And so I think it was a good sign, but I also will just point to that and say that's the reason why they only had 24 assists. It's also the reason why they didn't, beat that team by 15 points, because they didn't hit their 3-point shots.
They had like 8 or 9 assists at halftime. And Mike said postgame that was one of the things they kind of emphasized. And it wouldn't surprise me if that quick timeout is, hey, we just talked about these things we need to do better. And they weren't at first there.
Yeah, totally. And I think part of the reason why they started getting assists was because they started hitting 3-point shots. DeMar DeRozan started it. Keegan Murray took off. I want to kind of jump off there. It feels like Keegan Murray is slowly finding himself. And if I were to pick out a Keegan Murray stat line, it was last night's stat line. It was 18 points, 9 rebounds, 7 of 14 from the field, 3 of 7 from 3. Is it just me, or is that like, please figure out a way to manufacture this and be that guy?
That might be asking even a lot, though, right now. It shouldn't be, compared to what we've seen in recent years, but the way this season has gone, even if you turn that 18 to 14 or 15, and maybe those rebounds to stay where they're at and give the defensive effort he's had, that would make me happy. To be a little bit more, just to be a little bit more giving there, allow for some room, at least at this point, and then maybe by February, it's closer to 18.
I think it's in the ballpark. There's variance on both sides, right? It could be a little lower. He could have a game where he knocks down 5 threes, but he's over 40% from 3 in the last 5 games, for what it's worth. I know it's a small sample, and I think there's a 1 of 7 game in there too, for what it's worth. But you don't see him putting his, like, the thing that Mike Brown has pointed out he watches for, and now I'm kind of tapped into, I guess, as Keegan puts his head down at times when things aren't necessarily going his way. I don't feel like we're seeing that quite as much. The 6 offensive rebounds might be the most impressive thing. I know the 3 of 7 from 3 obviously is nice to see considering his start to the year, but they had 18 offensive rebounds in this game. He and Domas each had 6, and second chance points was a huge reason that they were able to win this game. So again, Keegan is doing a lot of other things. I thought he was solid defensively in this one as well, as was pretty much everyone. But yeah, I think that this is about what you would hope, with a little wiggle room going in either direction.
Yeah, and like I think not only did Keegan have 9 rebounds, but he had probably like another 4 or 5 tip out balls. They, knocked the ball out to other shooters. I thought he did a really good job, and I don't think asking the number 4 pick in the draft, who's in his 3rd season, to average 18 points a game is asking too much. I got to be honest. Like I know he hasn't been that player this season, but this is a guy who averaged over 15 a game last year. The natural progression of a player would have thought he would be closer to 18. And from here on out, I think if the Kings are going to be super productive and if they're going to have this, rotation that includes basically 6 players playing major minutes and then 1 or 2 other guys getting close to 15 to 20 a night and then one other guy playing like 8 to 10 minutes a night, Keegan has to be more, and I don't know if they can feature him more with the second unit when DeMar and Domas and Malik step off the court when it's Fox and him with a couple of other bench guys. But I still feel like he needs to find that rhythm, and in order for the Kings to like reach their potential, I think he's one of the avenues for them to get up to, to get back in this thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Yep.
think he and De'Aaron are the two that I look at of where can this team take another step internally. I think those guys have another level they could potentially take their game to. And we mentioned that stretch where De'Aaron's kind of the one running the show. That it's now the case because Malik's starting. Keegan's another one out there, and I think they would love for him to be able to create more for himself. Mike Brown mentioned that he's like figuring out his shot a little bit more this year, and I think that's using that strength, kind of taking 1-2 dribbles off the drive, bumping a guy, and hitting a little midi over the top. A lot of teams will put smaller defenders on him. Like when they played the Spurs, Chris Paul is guarding Keegan Murray. And like, I know that you have a lot of better options offensively that you want to feature, but there's part of me that I'm like, they can really get away with this, So I think there's definitely obviously more steps that he can continue to take, but he's trending in the right direction and he's doing a lot of other things outside of scoring.
Yeah, I'd also point out that I think Keegan has quietly learned the DeMar DeRozan shoulder dip move to clear space. So I don't know if you guys have noticed that when he goes off the dribble and he goes to pull up like for a fadeaway, he drops his shoulder just for a second and then falls away. So I do think he's learning, and it's like, it's going to be a process to get him back to the player that you think he should be. But I'm not going to like back away from who I think like as a player and as like the natural progression of a player that Keegan Murray should be like moving on to. Does that make sense? Like this dude should be giving you something similar to this on a nightly basis. And if not this, maybe a little bit more, and some nights maybe a little bit less, but still in that between 16 and 20 points and 7 to 9 rebounds. I don't think that's too much to ask. Cool. Let's get to the business of basketball. I know you guys love when I do this, but no, I'm not going to ask you what whether they're going to
What are
make a
they going
trade
to
or
do?
not. No, but I think if we're looking at this right now, and you're like, okay, how do they help themselves? Like in the trade market, right? If they're going to go out and get a player type, not a specific player, and if you have specific players, that's fine. But if there's a player type, a position, whatever it might be, that you think that they have to have right now, how are you prioritizing? Maybe like number 1, number 2, number 3, and I don't know. Sean, we'll start with you.
I mean, I sound like a broken record. I've gone from being they need a scoring wing, and they get that. But I had said that for 3 years, 4 years. To me, this team needs a Aaron Gordon type, and I don't know that you're able to acquire that type of player. But whatever the market's looking like, I think there's ways to add to your team, even though you don't get what you ultimately hold the highest that could help out. But to me, I think what's sorely needed on this team is a more definitive uh, help role for Sabonis that is impactful defensively, stretches the floor, does everything someone like Aaron Gordon does, and offers a lot of size. So athleticism and physicality, I think all those things in one player, if you can find it. They don't grow on trees, man, but that's what every team needs. And this team, for a team that really lacks size and physicality, needs it in the worst way.
Let's say let's say they find that player, and I'm not saying whether it's a starter or whether
Right.
it's a bench guy, right? Because to be honest, I think Keegan Murray can be a lot of what Aaron Gordon is. He's not going to be the leaper that Aaron Gordon is, but outside of that, defensively, rebounding wise, like scoring wise, he is in the ballpark. After that, what's your next step? What's the next position that you think, man, you got to have, or player type?
I mean, really anything of quality. I mean, I think right now, because you came in with a lot of guards, you don't really have one with size that's going to go out there and get you, be able to kind of hold down the fort, so to speak, take some pressure off of Fox. I mean, Malik Monk was that type of player, and you brought him in. So, I think maybe a more true backup center, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, there's really anything that improves your team at this point. That's really what you need, because you can certainly see moments where you need more playmaking. You can certainly see moments when you need size in your backcourt. I think you've addressed a lot of issues on this team, but the scoring doesn't bother me. It's finding other ways. You could always use another shooter if Kevin Huerter is going to be inconsistent. And obviously, if you're a Kings fan, you're constantly hearing the likes of Huerter and Trey Lyles being dangled out there. But if you're losing somebody like Huerter, shooting becomes really at a premium. And I know the joke there is, well, he's not hitting shots. He's not hitting shots. Well, the threat of Kevin Huerter hitting shots still helps your team. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer it. I just know they have a lot of holes at the moment. They have some roster imbalance. We've talked about it, but they got to find wins. How do you find wins?
Yeah,
Brennan?
I think the Aaron Gordon shout is good. My only hesitation is that those guys are really rare, like you kind of said, and that's part of the complication that comes with building around Domantas Sabonis. Just to be blunt, and you're forfeiting rim protection when you go in that direction, and that's hard to get from a 4 who can also space the floor, which kind of makes me lean a little more towards guys like Trey Murphy style, for example. Really, the answer is going to be 1 to 3 for my preferences are probably all wings and forwards. I think that's what this team needs more than anything. You need size. You hear Mike Brown compliment every team that they play, the size, length, and athleticism. And I'm like, there's something here. There's a reason he keeps saying this. And he's been saying it for years. And it's still the same issue. So that's where I would go. I think that you do need a guy that is going to be, you don't have to be elite from 3, but I think you have to be willing to take it and obviously hit at a decent rate. And a plug and play defender as well, and if you wanted to try to address some of that playmaking stuff, there are wings that can kind of do that. I think of Kyle Anderson, for example, that could just help bolster the playmaking a little bit, not changing things in that regard necessarily, but to me, it's wings and forwards. And I think that the guys have to be able to shoot and play like they are that size as well, because there's some bigger guys that maybe don't quite play like it.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree. Like we all talk about all the time. It's like length and athleticism at the 3 and the 4, right? And it's almost to this point, it's like, I don't really care who it is. Or I mean, again, there's so many variants on the type of player. I've been in and then out and then in and out on Kyle Kuzma so many times that I'm kind of out on Kyle Kuzma as a player at this point. But if it's a Cam Johnson type player, it's a Dorian Finney-Smith player, who are 2 totally different types of 3-4s, I don't care. I would take either one, right? Because I think this team has a ton of scoring. They don't really need as much Cam Johnson, but the fact that he's 28, Dorian Finney-Smith is 31, I'd probably lean towards a younger player, even if it costs more. But then on top of that, I do think this team needs another playmaker. And it's something that, when you move Malik Monk into the starting lineup and then you take Malik Monk at, 25, 26 minutes a game and you bump him up to 32 to 34 minutes, I think you're playing with fire. And so for me, I think that there's going to come a point where both him and Fox are players who, historically have missed time. And if you go through a stretch where you don't have one or the other or both, you're going to be in all kinds of trouble. And I know that everyone would be in trouble if they lost that type of playmaking. But at the same time, like, what is your answer? Because, you very quickly run out of playmaking. So my suggestion would be to go out and try to see what it costs to get a Bones Highland. Go just to see what you got there and see if you can get a creator. See if you can get Trey Mann out of Charlotte. Um, just so you have a third guard in the rotation that can go out, who's big, who can go out and score, who can go out and create for others. Because I think this team is, because of the way they're built at this point, they're like one injury away from being like, yeesh, this is trouble, even in the backcourt. And again, maybe Devon Carter can help there, but I look at Devon Carter as more of a combo guard than I do like as a natural setup man, a good defender and, good rebounder and stuff like that. But I don't know if he's going to be a guy who can come in and get you 12 or 15 points a game and can get you 3 or 4 assists. Maybe he is, but I certainly think that there's a risk here of not having the type of young player or the type of scorer that you need off the bench. And I know you're going to stagger lineups and do all that stuff, but like if you're deciding to be a offense first team, then you need more punch. Just like, I don't think these guys can sustain for 82 games with it just being like 5 or 6 guys who are your primary scorers. And then everyone else has just kind of got to fit some weird role that is there one night, not another. Sean, you were shaking your head at me.
No, I bristled at Bones Highland. There was no way I would do that. But
I like Bones.
Yeah, I don't. I don't. Here's the other. I just don't like him for this team at all. I mean, I think you have, again, I don't think it really helps you in a lot of ways. And plus, one of the things that hasn't been talked about enough, for as much as Sabonis has been fantastic this year, when you're looking at playmaking, you don't have to look much further than him. I mean, he sets the table so well for all these other guys. You've got guys like him, DeRozan, Fox, and Monk. All capable of being playmakers on this team. So for me, and I'm with you because I know I just talked about playmaking, having a guard that can come in with size, if you can say this about a lot of players, but if Jordan McLaughlin is your guy, if he had 3 more inches on him, he'd be probably sensational in that role. I'm also not of the belief that he can't play. To me, I think if I'm Mike Brown, if there's one or two moves that I'm looking at doing a little bit more consistently, it'd be finding him minutes, because I love the way he pushes the pace. I love the way he can hit a 3. He's sneaky. He comes out and affects the game in a very positive way. He's not big. That's the only problem with him. And everything else he does, though, he very rarely makes mistakes. He's someone who kind of has a full grasp on what they're trying to do, and offensively, spacing is always kind of a conundrum, but he seems to know where to go all the time. So to me, I think he has to be a guy that could probably play almost every single day. I don't think that's going to happen, but if you had a guy who was anywhere from 6'3" to 6'6" or higher, I mean, shoot, not that they're getting Josh Giddey, but you've got Josh Giddey, isn't he like 6'8"? Point guards with size is always people salivate over. So if they could find some type of player like that, I'm with you, James. But I think they have enough playmaking per se. It's just really having size at that position more than anything that can come in and be a consistent pop.
I like J-Mac a lot. He also seems like one of the nicest dudes ever, by the way, for what it's worth.
Absolutely.
Like actually
Super
the
nice.
nicest person on the planet.
Yeah.
And your point of him pushing the pace, I think, is the main thing that he really brings. But the issue, and I think this also goes to, James, what you're talking about with adding point guard, is like, how many guards are you going to play at once? And maybe in a trade that naturally works itself out with who you may send out. But right now, Keon Ellis and Kevin Huerter and De'Aaron Fox are all on the floor during this like stretch that we're talking about where they're lacking playmaking. And it's like, you might even have Keegan at the 4 there. And it's like, how many guards are you going to play? Whose minutes does it come from? And that's not a unsolvable issue or anything like that. But right now you already have, so many guys that you want to see on a nightly basis, the ones that you feel like you can rely on. A lot of them are guards. And so I think you're in a tough spot of like, where do I even get this guy minutes? I think that's the sort of conundrum with McLaughlin right now. I don't think that he's bad. It's just, who is he playing over?
Yeah, no, I get that. I just think that you can go out and get players that are just better than what you have on the roster, that because they're just so much better that you're going to play them. Like I always talk about, it's one thing to go get a defensive player, but if he can only play 8 minutes a night or 12 minutes a night off your bench, like how much does that impact the overall, defensive acumen of your team? And the answer is it doesn't. You can't defend anyone while sitting there on the bench. Um, and I kind of feel the same way. Like I like Jordan McLaughlin. I think he's a good dude. But like Mike Brown is shown to not have like sort of the faith in putting him out there every night, like Sean said. And I
Let
don't
me
know
ask you.
why that is overall, but
Let me ask you this, kind of to that point with Brenden. Like, let's go to the forwards, for example. Kind of using that theory with you a little bit. Like, if depending upon who obviously is being shipped out, in an ideal world, let's use somebody like Cam Thomas. Okay, like what does that look like to you?
a trade?
Not a trade, but how do you like piecing in the rotation?
Well, I think it is somewhat like we don't have to get into specifically, I guess, who could be sent out, but I do think that is mainly what in any trade, that's where this comes up, right? Is that you're losing some of these guys. Like if Kevin Herter is part of that deal, which it
Right.
seems like that probably logically makes sense with just salary matching, then he pretty much just fills into that spot, and
Go
then
to the
Keon Ellis gets more opportunity at
go
the
to
two.
okay. Go to the forward now. Go to Cameron Johnson. Like,
Yeah, I mean, you
that's
don't
a guy.
have
Are you
DeMar
starting
at
him?
the. I
No.
mean, it's too late to take Malik out in my mind. I think you're stuck with this starting group. Like,
Right.
who are you starting him over? Keegan? I don't think so. I think
No,
it just
Cam's coming
means
off the
less of
bench.
right. I think it means less of DeMar playing the 4, which is something we've seen more recently, and I've actually liked because I think it is leaning into the offense. But it's maybe Keegan can play the 3 sometimes more often, but I think it's really Keegan and DeMar. You can more so put them at the. Sometimes those guys can play the 2 even in certain lineups. If you wanted to get funky and put Trey Lyles out there too when he's healthy, So I think it just lets you play bigger lineups. Really, all of these guys in my mind, at least Cam Johnson wise, like he can play 2 to 4 on this team,
Right.
which I think helps.
Yeah, and like I mean, for my money, if you're going out and getting Cam Johnson, you can find him 28 to 30 minutes a game. And the way you do that is pretty clear. Like Kevin Herter and Trey Lyles are part of that deal. While Brenden doesn't want to talk names, like the way to get to a Cam Johnson,
Right.
like financially, his $22 million salary is for you to trade those two players. And then, you're going to have to give up a pick to go get him.
I think you're starting Cam Johnson if you're getting him.
Over.
I think you go with a Sabonis, Johnson, Keegan, DeRozan, and Fox.
Yeah, but can you go back? Can you go back with DeMar?
Absolutely, you can go back. 100%,
You think?
you can go back.
Okay. Well, I'm intrigued to see if that's the case because you just had your $40 million a year center tell you, Sean Cunningham, that it's about time that Malik Monk is in the starting lineup.
That was kind of crazy.
Yeah, but that says the roster is currently constituted.
Okay.
For a team that sorely needs size, and you already know, look, Malik Monk going back to the bench is not like, oh, he's going to become Kevin Herter. He's going to give you the pop you need. The guy understands his role.
Yeah, my concern, again, if we just look at the two players on the Nets, right? If you look at Dorian Finney-Smith and you look at Cam Johnson, like Cam Johnson's played plenty of time off the bench in his career.
Sure.
And I think he can come in and go right to the bench. My question is does he respond to that? Does he respond to a new situation or does he go dormant like he has in the past? Because that is a knock on Cam Johnson that even last year with the Nets, they needed scoring so bad and he wasn't averaging 18-8 a game like he is this year. He's averaging 13 something. And like,
Which
does
is
he
fine. I think
have
that's fine on the Kings. You don't need him to go out there and light the world on fire.
no,
From a scoring standpoint.
but I need him
Just
not to shy away and not to
he needs to be
like,
he needs to be a disruptor. Go help
yeah.
everything.
It's crazy and probably not something that I don't know how strongly it'd be considered, but like DeMar feels that bench role the same way that Malik would.
Well,
But I
mean,
want DeRozan with Sabonis, and especially with some of the read and react stuff that they run, he's a starter. You're not putting DeRozan on the bench.
Yeah.
not this year. But if you were to get Cam Johnson, who's under contract for 2 more years, then sure. It's just, what are you going to have to give up in order to get a player like that?
Fun conversation though. But I think
that's
that
tough.
I just use Cameron Johnson as a face, because really, let's say you're bringing in another big, which is sorely needed. What's it look like? Who, to your point, Brenden, who does it come at the expense of minutes wise? How do you fit it in rotationally? And if you're adding size to your lineup, depending upon the talent level, and you're not a whole offensively, for example, like a Ben Simmons, where you might be a playmaker but you can't score. I don't think they have any interest in adding a player like that to their starting rotation. But if you have a guy who can go out there and stretch the floor and not be a hole offensively and still add something defensively, there's, depending upon the player, you could envision that player starting.
Yeah, I just don't know.
Matters. Not that it ultimately really doesn't matter, though. I mean, whether you're coming off the bench or you're scoring, you can still divvy up the minutes to where you still, have more minutes off the bench. So
I would be surprised if Malik Monk wasn't the starter for the next 3.5 years. Like, once you made that move, you made that move. And that's why Mike didn't want to make the move.
Yeah, but it's not like it's, I don't know. We'll see. But it's
not to speak for you, James, but that's like more about Malik than anything, right? I mean, this guy's been super vocal about wanting to start. When we asked him about it the other day, he's like, I thought I was starting when I first signed here, and that didn't end up happening. And not that he didn't embrace the bench role, but that's where I wonder how that would go. He did, knowing what he was signing up for.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I would also say that, like, the second you did put him in the starting lineup, you went 4-2, and your offense looked spectacular, and you started averaging 30-something assists per game, and it worked. And if you're going to go back from that, that's tough. So, I mean, like, look, I still think Malik is going to have to work defensively to stay on the court. He's going to have to show that he can play 30-something minutes a night long term, because that's not easy. And he is a player who goes through stretches during the season where you can see he runs out of gas and his shooting stroke just goes way off. But I think that the positive is we saw it last night. I mean, they won that game because one of the reasons is because Malik Monk, snuck in and stole a ball late in the game. And he's quick. If he does use his skill on both ends of the court, then I don't think you're going to have a problem, But you also have an undersized roster, and Sean, you're probably right. Like, a 6'8" Cam Johnson starting at the 3 alongside Keegan Murray, and then pushing DeMar to the starting, shooting guard spot. That might be the best solution. But I don't know that he can hang there at all defensively at this point. And to Brendan's point, I could also see Malik Monk with Cam Johnson and De'Aaron Fox and Keegan Murray and Domantas Sabonis with a DeMar DeRozan coming off the bench and having carte blanche with the second unit. And, even that's with, he'll get plenty of time with Sabonis. But it's tough. I guess that's why we're not paid to coach. Sweet. Okay. I think we've just about got it done here. Do we have final thoughts from you guys? We're not doing a live show today, so we don't have any questions from the audience, but let's start with you, Brenden. What do you got? Final thoughts?
Just first off, holy shit, we got the final thoughts in under an hour.
I think Sean is either frozen or he fell asleep.
One of the two. Might be both. Using it as an excuse. There he goes.
We just lost him. We've lost Sean.
I don't have anything too crazy, the X Games are coming to Sacramento for a handful of years. When we get Sean back here, Sean seems like an X Games guy. I don't know what it is. I could be totally off with that, but something tells me he might be a little excited about that. I'm looking for something to do this weekend, though. I don't know if you have any ideas, James. I'm thinking of taking the lady to a Sharks game tomorrow. Specifically tomorrow is something I'm looking for. So we'll see. I'm excited about celebrating Will Smith, home team, trying to embrace it.
Sean is back. Uh-oh. Now I've done something wild with my stuff.
Sean, are you an X Games guy at all? You strike me as somebody to be a little excited about that.
I'm very excited about it. I love the fact it's coming to Sacramento. I do watch a little bit of it. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert. It's just one of those things that when you happen to be flipping by or something, it just catches the eye. It's great television. I'm a stop and watch type of person when it's on. I kind of monitor it a little bit, and if it comes to Sacramento, I would definitely monitor it. I think it's awesome.
I missed all of this. Where is the X Games coming to Sacramento, and where are they going to put these things, these events?
Is it the Cal Expo? Do I have that right? It was not a crazy place. Let me see. Make sure.
The Cal Expo.
It
does make sense that it would be a Cal Expo because, I mean, you forget about that as a venue, but it is a pretty substantial venue. I mean, it's a huge place.
Yeah, definitely is.
Boy,
Yeah,
at
Cal Expo for 3 years, from 2025 to 2027.
Wow, that's tremendous. Look at that. We're getting all kinds of real sports. Real sports.
The Vex Master Plan, something every night in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. So
James,
that's
did you reserve your A's season tickets or
No, I never even saw that either. No, I was not gonna.
they're on sale to the general public now. You can go get it.
Is outrageous.
No, I don't think so. I mean, season tickets are always expensive, but I don't think that I think they're depending upon where you want to sit. It's going to be an intimate ballpark, so
Yeah,
How about the
intimate.
most
That's a good way of saying
unsurprising-
small.
Actually, how about the most unsurprising fake reporting that they were chasing after Max Fried? Who could have seen that coming as BS?
garbage.
Crazy.
Yeah.
The Mania one made more sense. Like I was like, yeah, I can see that, and I can also see why he told you to go kick rocks. But Severino that's a fantastic. I mean, that's a huge signing for them. That's awesome.
I think so too. And they said they have to. Well, the Players Association is looking at them to spend at least another $25 million a year. And I don't know if that's one player, if that's 5 players. I also there's rumors of Brent Rooker signing an extension.
No, that'll happen.
What you think so?
Yeah, they'll get that done.
Okay, I hope so. I like Rooker, and I think Rooker at Sacramento is gonna be super fun. That's gonna be a lot of fun. I mean, that guy can hit 50 something jacks in Sacramento. Yeah, and I think
have him aim for the money store.
What's that?
Have him aim for the money store when he's out there. Just crack that pyramid in West Sac.
It's not a pyramid, Sean.
It's not.
It's a ziggurat. Just so you know.
That's what I hear. Yeah, you might have to explain that.
No, that's a pyramid.
My dad helped build the ziggurat when it was the money store. Yeah, my dad was part of that crew that built that building. So,
What am I missing here with the money store? Explain this to me.
the money store used to be like a lending company, and that was their building. The ziggurat / pyramid.
The
That
pyramid.
you see in West Sac. Yeah, you can look up. There's a difference between a pyramid and a ziggurat. So
they got state offices in there now. So
who's there now?
Oh, I don't even remember.
Like Department of Consumer Affairs is in the old Arco building.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know either. That's interesting.
Anyway, state workers report.
It's a cool building, and it looks really cool when it's all lit up at night, and it's right there by Sutter Health Park. So, okay, let's see. What else do we have? The Kings don't play again until Monday.
I got to run.
Yep, the Kings don't play again until Monday. We got all kinds of things coming up. Make sure to tune in. Jump on board with Underdog Fantasy. Go download the app. Use Kings Beat for matching and for picks, and let's do this thing. So that's gonna do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. For Box 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. I'm James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. See you very soon.